Could please the members of the committee take their seats so that we can start the proceedings? We don't have the quorum yet, so please, members of the Animals Committee, take your seats so that we can start. Good morning, everybody. Can you please take your seats? I would like to start the proceedings in 1 minute, so please take your seats. Okay, good morning. Can you please take the seats and slow down your conversations? I think we would like to start the proceedings. So can you please take your seats now? Okay, so I would like to welcome everyone to this sequel of the Animals Committee meeting 33. Last Friday, we opened the Animals Committee at the joint meeting of Plants and Animals Committee. So we will not have any introductory remarks. They were done last Friday. I will just quickly say what we decided on Friday for those who were not here. So we have adopted the agenda and we have adopted the working program as it has been published. So we will go along the working program as agreed on last Friday. How I intend to manage the meeting, We have a very heavy agenda, many items to look at. So I want to hear as much input as possible. But to be able to do so, I have to limit the time of interventions. So party observers will have 3 minutes maximum for their interventions. Observer organizations will have 2 minutes maximum. So please adhere to these guidelines, because if you don't, I will have to cut you off, and I don't like to do that. And if I do cut you off, it's not out of disrespect of what you want to say, but out of respect to all the others who also have something to say and something to add. So please abide to these rules so that we can have a large and informed discussion. And quick note of the role of the members of the committee. So it's these people sitting here up front. It's the members of the committee. They have been proposed for election by their regions in their personal capacity. And they will take the decisions. So it's up to them to decide based on what we hear, what the majority says, or what we have unanimously heard. But it's those individuals who will take the decision, not the room. Good. With this, before I go to our first agenda item, we have already one summary, executive summary. It's AC 33 Sum 1. It sums up what has been decided and happened last Friday. And I would like to open the floor for any comments on that summary record. So it's AC 33 Sum 1. It has been translated and is up on the website long enough. So if you have any comments on AC 33 Sum 1, I do have one to make. In the Spanish version, we do have an English heading. It says Executive Summary. Of course, that will be corrected to read Resumen Ejecutivo. And also the date will be written in Spanish. I don't see anybody asking for the floor, so it is adopted. Thank you very much. So with this, we now open agenda item 14.1, review of the significant trait in specimens of Appendix-II species. And I give the floor to the Secretary to introduce 14.1, overview of the review of significant trait. So Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I will introduce agenda item 14.1 and refer to document AC 33, Doc 14.1, Rev 1, which was produced by the Secretariat. And it updates the Animals Committee on the status of the review of significant trait, or the RST process, for fauna species. Annex 1 provides an overview of all fauna cases, or species range state combinations, with updates since the 31st meeting of the Animals Committee, and an indication of their current status within the review process, as well as the reference documents that provide detailed information for each case. Annex 2 presents a summary table of all fauna range state species combinations that are subject to a recommendation to suspend trade under RST, or for which the review process is currently ongoing. Please note that a revised version of the document was produced to correct 2 cases from Indonesia concerning Coura amboinensis and Malamus subtrajuga, which were removed from the review after SC 77 following the publication of annual export quotas, including the relevant size restrictions that were proposed by the Standing Committee. These had been mistakenly included as ongoing cases in the original version and have been corrected in the revised version. The document also provides an update on the implementation of decisions 17.108 Rev Cop 19 to 17.110 Rev Cop 19 on the development of an RST tracking and management database that was launched during a side event at COP19. The Secretariat is currently enhancing this RST tracking and management system, in particular to make it easier to use the search filters and provide alerts to parties who are in the RST process. So the Animals Committee is invited to note document AC33, Doc 14.1, Rev 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretary, for introducing the document. I open the floor for any comments from the members, and saying that if I don't hear anything, I take that as agreement, so no comments is agreement. Okay, no comments from the members. I open the floor to observer parties who wish to take the floor. And observer organizations who wish to take the floor. So thank you very much. I haven't heard anything, so I take this as consent that we can note that the Animals Committee notes document AC33, Doc 14.1, Rev 1. Thank you. We then move on to agenda item 14.2, implementation of recommendations for species selected following COP14, COP15 and COP17. Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The document by the Secretariat reports on 5 cases where actions were taken by parties to implement recommendations made by the Animals and Standing Committees since the Secretariat last reported on implementation and recommended action, to the Standing Committee at its 77th meeting in document SC 77, Doc 35.3. The fauna species country combinations reviewed in document AC 33, Doc 14.2 are Pandinus imperator from Togo, and it should be noted that this case is currently subject to a recommendation to suspend trade. Camellia gracilis from Togo, Notocellus platanota from Indonesia, and 2 cases concerning Anguilla, and that is from Algeria and Tunisia. The document presents the Secretariat's determination of implementation of these recommendations, and also drafts recommendations based on new information provided by the parties concerned. And these can be found in Annex 1 in the language and format in which they were received. In accordance with paragraph 1K of Resolution Conf 12.8, Rev Cop 18, the Animals Committee is invited to consider the recommendations of the Secretariat as set out in paragraph 17, which are based on the summary tables in Annex 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So I think it would be good to ask if any of the parties concerned, such as Togo, Indonesia, Algeria, or Tunisia, would wish to take the floor to comment on the document. I see Togo has asked for the floor. Togo, you have the floor.
Merci. Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time I've taken the floor at this meeting, allow me to begin by thanking the Swiss government for facilitating our participation. I would also like to thank the Secretariat for their support. I would like, Chair, to thank you for all of the support that you have given Togo, and also to thank the Secretariat for their assistance through the CAP, which has enabled us to work on our RST. With respect to the Camellia gracilis case, I would like to say the following. We have submitted a simplified NDF, which should allow us to have some discussion on this issue in the course of this meeting with respect to the status of Camellia gracilis. I was involved in this national evaluation exercise. It seems, through our work, that the species is fairly present throughout the country. What we have concluded has enabled us to suggest that the suspension of trade be lifted if the AC can go along with the proposal that we have submitted. This because the species is prevalent in 3/4 of the country with respect to the habitat that it uses. Thank you, sir.
Merci le Togo. Indonesia asking for the floor. Indonesia, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Indonesia appreciates the Secretariat and Animal Committee for the assistance since this species listed in process of RST in Animal Committee 28 of 2015. Indonesia will publish an annual export quota from 2024 of 250 specimens of Notochelis platinota with size restriction with a maximum strike carapace length of 15 centimeters as a recommendation in document AC 33 14.2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia, for that confirmation. I would now open the floor for comments from the members of the committee. I see Asia. Asia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. I follow the process, and the process has been stay for a long time with the improvement of the management, as well as the Indonesia has been submitted the NDF. So I think this process can be goes to less concern. Thank you.
Thank you for your support. Any other member? North America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone. The North America region thanks the Secretary for preparing this document and supports its recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, North America. Europe, you have the floor.
The limits for the different classes Togo uses in the simple NDF template have been updated at the workshop in Nairobi. But these numbers are the outdated ones, which have been much higher. So I think it is necessary that Togo adopts to the new numbers, which would allow a much lower trade volume according to the simple NDF. For Camellia gracilis, it would be about 500 specimens only. And for Pandinus, it is not clear which numbers are to apply here because the work stream on invertebrates did not provide an update, but still it should be considered to use the conservative measures proposed by the reptile work stream, as the basic reproductive biology is more alike with reptiles than with typical insects or other invertebrates. In regard to the recommendation A and B for Patinos imperator from Togo, if Togo decides that they want to trade everything under the wild source code, then these recommendations might need an update, because if Togo doesn't intend to do any ranging, then they cannot fulfill otherwise these recommendations. In regard to Notochelis platinota, I would agree that the current NDF is sufficient for the trade in the 250 specimens, and considering the size limit of 15 centimeters, and would agree that this process can be closed. For the Anguilla species, I won't go into details now, but I agree with the recommendations of the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Europe. I now open the floor to observer parties, and I see Togo. Togo, you have asked for the floor.
Thank you, sir. I would like to thank the representatives for Europe and North America who have responded to the document that we submitted to this meeting. With respect to Camellia gracilis, as I said earlier, I am a specialist and am very familiar with the Togolese ecosystem. The management and scientific authorities and the stakeholders in Togo all agreed with respect to this species. And they agreed on the figure of 1,500 specimens per annum. That is what we proposed based on our work in the field in different ecosystems in the range areas for the species as a result of meticulous field work. So that is the proposal that we had, and I would, of course, congratulate the Secretariat for their work and thank them if our figure is accepted. And I would stress that this is the result of our work, and the figures we're proposing do not in any way threaten Camellia gracilis. With respect to Pandinus imperator, I don't quite know how to put it, but with respect to this species, it is a very, very common and abundant species. It is a species that can cope even with degraded habitats. Pandinus imperator is very, very commonly found in Togo. If you look at the number of individuals per hectare, sometimes there's over 100 per hectare, including in inhabited areas. The quota we've proposed is correct, given the status of the species. Once again, this is a result of field work in which I participated. Thank you. Thank you, Togo, for those explanations.
I have some disagreement between the range state, who is proposing the figures, and what the members are saying. I would propose that we add this case for discussion in the RST working group to have a more thorough discussion and to come up with a consensus solution on this case. So I would propose we will add this to the mandate of the RST working group. Sorry about that. But I think we cannot solve the issue here right now. I haven't heard any other comments on the other cases so far. So if besides the case of Togo that we will submit to the RST working group, I don't see anybody asking for the floor. So the conclusions would be the Animals Committee agreed to the following recommendations. A, concerning Notochelis platinata from Indonesia, the Animals Committee recommended the removal of Notochelis platinata from Indonesia from the review of significant trade. Any increase in the quota above 250 wild specimens should be communicated to the Secretariat and the Chair of the Animals Committee, along with a non-detriment finding, including a justification of how the change is conservative, based on estimates of sustainable offtake that make use of best available scientific information for their agreement in advance of any trade taking place, any additional trade taking place. B, concerning Anguilla from Algeria, the Animals Committee agreed that recommendations D, G, H, and K have been implemented. Invite Algeria to liaise with the IUCN Anguillate Specialist Group to assist in the development of an NDF, and III invited Algeria to provide an update on the implementation of the outstanding recommendations I, J, and L by 30th September 2024 at the latest, for consideration before the 78th meeting of the Standing Committee. C, concerning Anguilla from Tunisia, the Animals Committee agreed that recommendations D to F have been implemented. Further, I invited Tunisia to liaise with the IUCN Anguillate Specialist Group to assist in the development of an NDF, and invite Tunisia to provide an update on the implementation of the outstanding recommendations G to L by 30th September 2024 at the latest, for consideration before the 78th meeting of the Standing Committee. For all remaining cases selected post-COP17, the Animals Committee agreed to invite range states that did not comply to consultations following SC77 to provide an update on the implementation of the outstanding recommendations by 30th September 2024 for consideration before the 78th meeting of the Standing Committee. Yes, nomenclature specialist?
Sorry, my apologies. I would be happier if our recommendation for Notochelis platinota for Indonesia would make explicit reference to the size limit of 15 centimeters or smaller. Thank you, Chair.
So it would read, any increase in the quota above 25 wild specimens with a carabus size inferior to 15 centimeters, and then going on, huh? Okay? Thank you very much. I was thinking about that. I thought it would probably include it, but it's better to be precise here. Very good. Thank you. Can we agree on this? Okay, I see nodding. So this is the conclusion of this agenda item. And we may have do we have to come back if there is something coming out of the working group, or it will be separate?
No, we'll have to come back.
Okay, okay. So we cannot completely finish that document because the case of Togo was explicitly mentioned in that document. So we haven't finished with the document totally, but we have now already quite a set of recommendations, but we will have to come back. Good. Now we will come to the agenda item 14.3 on species selected following COP19. This is going to be quite an exciting topic. We do have a new situation where we have sharks in RST which are presenting quite some challenges. And we already know several of these challenges. So if parties in the following will want to take the floor, please voice these challenges, because we will take these challenges up. And for the working groups tomorrow, we will ask first the shark working group to look at these concerns and these issues so that the following working group on RST can take note and use the recommendations from the shark working group to deal with the RST cases then in detail. So please, if you take the floor on shark issues, be brief, but note and mention the challenges that you see in implementation of that process for your cases. That will help us find solutions. Okay. That just as an introduction, I now open the floor to the Secretariat for introducing document 14.3.
Thank you, Chair. Document AC33, Doc 14.3, Rev 1 by the Secretariat presents the responses from range states for 20 animal species country combinations selected for the review of significant trade at AC32. And these responses are found in Annex 1 of the document. Originally, 21 cases were selected at AC32, but the committee should note that concerning trade in falco cheruk, Jordan confirmed that it does not export falcons at all. They are protected according to its national laws. In addition, Jordan stated that it does not have any facility that breeds falcons, but re-exports specimens imported legally into the country. As a result, this species country combination was not taken forward as a priority case in stage 2 of RST. A revised version was produced to highlight several issues related to marine species in RST, and these are outlined in paragraphs 10 and 11. For example, which countries should be included in RST where multiple exporting range states may be harvesting from a single stock. For migratory species, it might be more relevant to consider inclusion of particular stocks within the RST process and direct any recommendations to all parties that are exporting the species from these stocks, rather than selecting species country combinations at the outset. The Animals Committee is invited to consider these different scenarios further. The document also contains a report compiled by the United Nations Environment Programme World Conservation Monitoring Centre, or UNEP-WCMC, about the biology, management and trade in the species selected at AC32. And this report is found in Annex 2 of the document. It provides preliminary categorizations of each species country combination into one of 3 categories outlined in paragraph 1E of Resolution Conf 12.8, Rev Cop 18, namely action is needed, unknown status and less concern. For the 12 cases reviewed, 12 are provisionally categorized as action is needed, 6 are provisionally categorized as less concern, noting that 5 of these cases would only be categorized as less concern with the annual publication of 0 export quotas. The Animals Committee is invited to undertake the tasks, that are outlined in paragraphs 13 to 16 of document AC33, Doc 14.3, Rev 1, in accordance with paragraphs 1G and I of Resolution Conf 12.8, RevCop 18. In other words, the committee will review the responses from the range states in Annex 1 and the report from UNEP WCMC in Annex 2, along with any additional information received from the range states concerned. It will review and, if appropriate, revise the preliminary categorization proposed for each species country combination, providing a justification for any revision. For cases where action is needed, the committee will formulate, in consultation with the Secretariat, time-bound, feasible, measurable, proportionate and transparent recommendations directed to the range states that will be retained in the review process, and to formulate separate recommendations directed to the Standing Committee for problems identified in the course of the review that are not directly related to the implementation of Article 4, Paragraph 2A, 3 or 6A. And finally, Chair, as you've already mentioned, this is the first time that shark species have been considered under the review of significant trade, and several new issues have been highlighted that concern marine and migratory species. And so should it be decided to form an in-session working group on sharks and rays at this meeting, the committee may wish to include these issues in the mandate of that working group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I will just briefly say that it's not the time and place now to defend your cases. So you don't need to explain why you think the preliminary assessment is wrong. You will have time to do that in the working group where all those are sitting together concerned with these cases. So if you take the floor, just be brief and do as we have wished you to do so, because you will have time in the working group to really defend your single cases. Okay? So I open the floor for any comments from the members of the Animals Committee. I see Europe. Europe, you have the floor.
With the question, is it now time to propose something for the mandate of the shark? No. Okay. Then I don't have a comment. Sorry.
Whenever we will strike the working group, I will read out the mandate, and then we can look at that. I don't see any other member asking for the floor, so I open the floor to observer parties, and I see Israel has asked for the floor.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you for the preparation of this document to the Secretary. I'm addressing paragraph 5 in the document, which the Secretariat just mentioned, concerning trade in falco cherog from Jordan. And the decision by the Secretariat, or the suggestion by the Secretariat, to remove it from the process. A simple check of the CITES trade database and the list of annual reports presented by Jordan to the Secretariat shows that these statements may not be entirely the whole story. The reason I bring this up is that Israel has a great deal of enforcement issues trying to deal with illegal smuggling of raptors out of Israel, that apparently there's a pathway that leads to the Gulf states where they're in great demand. And Israel has a tremendous number of raptors that come through in migration. And falco cherog is in great demand for falconry. Jordan, in the last 6 years, has only submitted 2 national reports, so it's not even clear where the data is being based on. And even in those 2 reports, there are a couple of instances of commercial trade in falcons being exported, and these are the ones that are reported. So the statement in paragraph 5 does not appear to be entirely accurate. Obviously, now is not the time to investigate this, but we would, for that reason, prefer that this country-species combination stays in the review process so that the Secretary can follow up again and find out exactly what's going on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Israel. I think what we can do here is we can ask the Secretariat to look into this issue more in detail, and if they should see any concerns, propose that topic to the Standing Committee at the 78th meeting. Because, I mean, there has been trade. Jordan hasn't said they didn't trade. They said they re-exported animals that had been legally imported. So that there are trade transactions happening is confirmed by Jordan. But if there is a problem with illegal trade, that would be something for the Standing Committee to consider. So I would suggest that we ask the Secretary to look into the issue, and if they find irregularities, they would propose this topic to the Standing Committee. Yes, Israel?
Thank you, Chair. The way forward is acceptable with just one small change, not if they find something, but please ask the Secretariat in any case to report to the Standing Committee on what they find from their investigation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we'll do that. I see Kenya has asked for the floor. Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Kenya thanks the Secretariat for the preparation of the document AC33, Doc 14.3, Rev 1, on species selected for significant trade review process following COP19. Chair, at AC32, Kenya was included in the review of significant trade process for the oceanic white tip shark and the scalloped hammercop shark, following COP19. From Annex 1 of this document, it can be confirmed that Kenya provided a response to the consultations on the review of significant trade with respect to the two species. Kenya is satisfied with the recommendations of the Secretariat regarding the categorization of less concern with respect to Cacharrhinus longimanus. We are, however, concerned that the Secretariat is recommending that that categorization be conditional to publication of a zero export quota for the species. Chair, in our response to the consultations, we indicated that Kenya is signatory, Chair, in our response to the consultations, we indicated that Kenya is signatory to the CMS, where Cacharrhinus longimanus is listed in Appendix 1, requiring member states to strictly protect the species. We have also indicated that we are a contracting party to the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission that has imposed a retention ban on the species. Further, under our national wildlife legislation, the Wildlife Conservation and Management Act, Cap 376, the species is listed in the 6th schedule of the Act as threatened species. In mid-June 2024, we finalized and validated our National Action Plan for sharks for implementation with Cacharrhinus longimanus and Siphonia lewinii as priority species. Chair, with these legal instruments and other measures, we consider that they are adequate to ensure there is no offtake of the species for commercial trade, and therefore publication of a zero export quota may not be necessary. Chair, from this submission, it can be determined that we are meeting the provisions of Article 4 of the Convention, and therefore ask the Animals Committee to agree that Kenya is removed from the review of significant trade process for Cacharrhinus longimanus. Regarding the recommendation on scalloped hammerhead shark, we note that the Secretariat...
Kenya, please, sorry. you are defending your case now, and you will have the chance to defend your case in the working group. I understand what you are saying, and it makes sense to me, but we are not now dealing with each single case. You will be able to do that statement again in the working group, and it will be considered there, and they will then propose a decision to this committee. So I absolutely understand, but I think we should wait with these defense comments to the working group. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Chair. Much obliged. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I see Ghana. Ghana, you have the floor.
Sorry, I'll be with you very soon. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, Ghana also commends the Secretariat and UNEP, WCMC, for preparing the document AC33 Doc 14.3 Revision 1. We have noted that 2 of our species in trade have been listed for RSTV, the Python regus and Chenexis humiana. We have also noted some concerns about the recommendations from the report. And as you have said already, that we should leave clarifications and questions on the recommendations of the report to the in-session working group discussion. And because of that, we hope to make our concerns known during the in-session working group discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ghana, for your brevity. I have seen that Senegal has raised the flag. You can just press the button so that we can hear you. I see now Mexico. We give the floor to Mexico.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Mexico would like to thank the Secretariat for the document, and we will await the results and the general recommendations of the working group on sharks in the working group on RST. We invite the committee, the observer parties and organizations to review the information documents 19 and 21 provided by Mexico, which are available in Spanish and English, and which, amongst other elements, contain up-to-date information on the Pacific stocks and show that Mexico complies fully with Article 4 with robust NDFs for both species. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. I think the working group will consider this issue. I see Indonesia. Indonesia has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. At the outset, Indonesia would like to congratulate the Europe region for the Euro 2024 and UK and Spain for the excellent game last night. In particular, I'm wearing a red batik to honor Spain for his win last night. We agree with the chair way forward. We will provide our, I guess, arguments and additional information in the working group. And we thank the parties which has provided the indication on their concern. And we look forward to engage with many parties in this regard in the working group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. Now I have Senegal. Senegal, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. As Senegal, I would first of all like to thank the Secretariat for the presentation of this document, and for Senegal, the species that has been retained is Carcharinus longimanus, and we have the less concerned category with a zero quota. And at the beginning of the year, we sent a notification to the Secretariat for the official declaration of a zero quota. And I think we are within the provisions to continue to collaborate and to have a zero quota for the species. Thank you.
For this information. I see now Oman. Oman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. Regarding documents AC33, Doc 14.3, Rev 1, concerning the two shark species, the Carcharinus longimanus and the Spherni lewini, Oman was decided to cease of issuing permits for exporting these two species for 6 months. And we will extend, and this procedure will be extended until the NDF's study to be developed and finalized. However, Oman also had submitted last year two NDF study for big eyes thresher shark and the silky shark, which has been selected during the workshop that was carried out and organized by IFO, the International Fund for the Animal Welfare, in 2021 in Muscat. And we seize this opportunity to thank the IFO for their assistance and support regarding this workshop. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Oman, for this information. And I have now China. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. China informed the Secretary that China set a zero export quota for scalloped hammerhead until a national annual export quota can be set based on a comprehensive NDF in consultation with both the Secretary and the Chairman of the Animals Committee. The zero export quota would apply to all source and ports and purpose codes. China recommends that the Animal Committee consider adjusting China to less concern, and China will provide detailed information in the working group.
Thank you very much, China, for this information. I don't see any other party asking the floor, so I open the floor for some brief comments from observer organizations. I don't see anybody asking for the floor, so I will now proceed to strike a working group. And I read out the terms of reference of that working group slowly so that everyone can hear. So the Animals Committee agrees to establish an in-session working group with the following terms of reference. Okay. For the species country combinations selected following the 19th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, COP17, at the 32nd meeting of the Animals Committee, in accordance with paragraphs 1G and I of Resolution Conf 12.8 Rev COP 18, the in-session working group shall, concerning agenda item 14.3, review the information concerning trade in Camellia gracilis and Pandinus imperator from Togo and make recommendations as appropriate. B. Review the responses received from range states contained in Annex 1 of document AC33, Doc 14.3. and any additional information provided by range states, the report in the Annex 2 of document AC33, Doc 14.3, and, if appropriate, revise the preliminary categorizations proposed by the UNEP WCMC for the species range state concerned, providing a justification for such recategorization. C. Formulate recommendations directed to the range states retained in the review process using the principles outlined in Annex 3 of the resolution and the guidance on the formulation of recommendations contained in Annex 5 to document COP17 Doc 33. D. Formulate separate recommendations directed to the Standing Committee for problems identified in the course of the review that are not directly related to the implementation of Article 4, paragraph 2a, 3 or 6a, following the principles outlined in Annex 3 of the resolution, and E. Report its recommendations. Sorry?
You need to slot that in about 14.2 before that one.
And report its recommendations as well as recommendations in relation to agenda item 14.2 to the committee. Okay, Europe, you had when you took the floor, you had something to say along about the mandate. Are you satisfied with that mandate? Europe, you have the floor. Yeah.
Yes, my recommendations have practically been to the mandate of the Sharks Working Group, because these were the questions they should address to facilitate the work of the Review of Significant Trade Working Group. So whenever you want to hear them. Yes? Okay. It's 3 questions that I would request that the Shark Working Group tries to find a short and concise answer.
But Europe, I don't know, we're talking now about the mandate of the working group. So it's more something else that we are asking the Sharks Working Group to do. So I would propose that you insert those points when we talk about the mandate of the Sharks Working Group, just in a couple of minutes, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. North America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the benefit of the participants in the meeting, maybe it's worth to say to your guidance that the SIG-Trade Working Group will start with marine issues on day 1 and to leave terrestrial species for day 2. I think it's relevant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we just want to make sure that it is officially clear that the RST working group will consider the outcomes of the deliberations in the Shark working group. So I would insert in letter B, in the parentheses where it says, and any additional information provided by range states and the in-session Shark Working Group at AC33. So it is officially noted that the RST Working Group will consider the recommendations coming out of the Sharks Working Group. Okay, Does that sound in order? Okay, good. I'm jumping ahead a bit for the Sharks Working Group mandate, but I think we have to do that, so to be clear. Okay. So this mandate now seems agreeable. Now it's about striking the working group. The co-chairs is going to be Europe and North America. So Gerald Benier and Ezequiel Benitez will chair that working group. Which members will be participating in the RST working group? Asia, both Asian, nomenclature. I haven't asked parties yet. I'm asking Oceania. Yeah. Okay. Now I open the floor for membership of observer parties. I have Israel, Japan, Oman. When I have said your name, please press the button again to get out of the list. Then Mexico, China, Germany, Switzerland, Kenya, Australia, France, India, United States of America, South Africa, Netherlands, Spain, UK, Central South America and the Caribbean as a member, Saudi Arabia, Canada, Portugal, Republic of Korea, Senegal, Indonesia, Finland, Ghana, Panama, Laos PDR, the EU, New Zealand, Belgium, Russian Federation, Maldives. I have Oman again, Suriname, Cameroon, Austria, Malaysia, Ecuador. I think I already had Switzerland. You can, yeah. Hungary. Togo. Yes, I think Togo would also be good to be there because you will want to defend your case, so you will also be member of the working group, yes. So can all these that still have their button pressed, like Switzerland, Oman, Malaysia and Togo, press the button again so that they are out of the list? Okay. Did you get that? Now I open the floor for observer organizations, WCS, IUCN, HSI, SSN, Born Free, US, Pro Wildlife, WWF, SUCO South Africa, I think it is, SU Australasia, yes, Traffic, EASA, German Herpetological Society, UNEP WCMC, Defenders of Wildlife, FAO, Shark Conservation Fund, AWI, WDC, ZSL, IFF, and FFI, ASA, GGT, Bloom, CMS, CFDEC, BNA/AEV, WASA, I think it's Florida University, IFO, Blue Rest Trust, Resources Trust, yes, Sustainable Users Network, Save Our Seas, and SWAN. It appears that we have a balance, so it's more parties than observer organizations, so I think we can proceed with that. This working group will meet on Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday morning. And as we have tried to orchestrate the whole issue, on Tuesday afternoon they will be dealing with shark issues, and on Wednesday morning with the rest of the cases, so that you can prepare yourself when you want to be present. So it's Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday morning. Good. I see Europe, you have asked for the floor.
Yeah, just a short request for consideration. According to my calculation, we have 13 species, country combinations for 3 hours. That makes 30.8 minutes per species country combination. So please keep in mind, if you are preparing speaking notes for your interventions, that we have a very limited time for each species combination, and it would be helpful if you can be as concise as possible. The range states will get the chance, as Matthias promised, to present their case, but it might also be helpful if you have a short introduction and you get another chance if there are issues that require your second response. So perhaps not start with a 5-minute intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I think this is very important. Please also be concise in the working groups as much as possible. So condense your information. Very good. Okay, so that's, I see North America, you have asked for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just for transparency, I'd like to make clear that we are the co-chairs for this group, but my colleague from Europe region will be leading with marine species, and I'll be helping with the rest of the species. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is important as Mexico is directly concerned by the cases, so we have made sure that it will be impartial and you don't run into any trouble. Very good. Okay. Somebody is waving its flag. Is this CFDEC?
we requesting to attend the working group. Please include us to...
I did. You are included in the working group. I mentioned you, I didn't know your exact name, so I said what was standing there. So, but you are in the working group, don't worry.
Thank you very much.
You know, when you press the button, especially organizations, I only see a bit of your name in here. So that's what I usually then mention, and I hope I will remember you pretty soon and know the whole name, but for the moment I just have to take what I see here. Okay, with this I think we can move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item sharks and rays. It's agenda item 41, Rev 1, and I give the floor to the Secretariat to introduce it. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Document AC33, Doc 41, Rev 1 on sharks and rays, Elasmobranchii species, provides an overview of work implemented by the Secretariat under Decisions 19.222 to 19.224. In accordance with Decisions 19.222 and 19.224, the Secretariat issued 2 notifications to the parties, inviting parties to submit information related to the conservation and management of sharks, and presents the responses received from the latest notification in Annex 2 to the document. This also includes several NDFs and conversion factors, and the Secretariat thanks all the parties and observer organizations that have shared information. In Annex 3 to the document, the Secretariat provides information from the CITES trade database on commercial trade in CITES listed sharks and ray species since 2010, and provides the raw data from the CITES trade database in Annex 4. The Secretariat also presents in Annex 5 a draft version of Deep Diving into Shark Catch and Trade Mismatches, the study on the apparent mismatch between reported and expected trade in shark species, which was conducted in collaboration with Traffic and Deakin University. This study was possible thanks to the generous financial contribution by the European Union. With the Chair's indulgence, the Secretariat would like to invite Traffic to give a brief overview of the study after the introduction. The draft recommendations stemming from the study for the consideration of the Animals Committees are included in paragraph 15, which includes improved reporting on trade, adoption of a traceability system for international trade, follow-up on any mismatches in the trade database, and further guidance to parties on the implementation, particularly for catches that occur in areas beyond national jurisdiction. In accordance with Decision 19.223, the Secretariat also provides updates on the status of capacity building assistance, cooperation with regional fisheries management organizations, and FAO. In response to recommendations from AC32 to consider the feasibility of including the addition of catch locations at a minimum by ocean basin, the Secretariat presents 3 possible options for the inclusion of catch locations in the annual report in paragraph 22 to 28. The Animals Committee is invited to consider the recommendations in paragraph 29 of the document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. And as asked, I, of course, give the floor to Traffic. Traffic, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to comment on the shark mismatch review we conducted in partnership with Deakin University and the CITES Secretariat. It's exactly 30 years since we sat at COP9 discussing concern over the conservation status of sharks as a result of the international trade in their parts and products. In 1996, Traffic published a global review on shark trade in support of Resolution Conf 924, examining all available data sets as part of that review. For the study, the current study, data from RFMOs and FAO were examined for all Elasmobranchii species listed on the CITES appendices prior to and during the COP17 and the 2 Isurus species listed at COP18. The reporting of catch and trade over that 30 years has improved, not to forget the dramatic increase in trade data as a result of the listings that have occurred within the appendices of CITES. That said, there is still a huge need for improvements in reporting, particularly at the species level. The purpose of the current review was to examine data sets to better understand why the volume of catches prior to the listing of a species is not translating into expected records in the CITES trade database and therefore resulting in a mismatch. The study identified that the possible sources of mismatch are the use of different units to report shark and ray trade recorded in the CITES trade database and other databases, underreporting of exports and introduction from the sea of CITES-listed shark and ray species, a lack of clarity of the requirements of reporting under various scenarios of catch in the EEZs of a party and in areas beyond national jurisdiction, and finally, differences in reporting of catch from states and their territories and provinces in different databases. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Traffic. So I now open the floor for comments on this document, noting that we will have a working group looking at all these issues raised in the document, but I open the floor for any comments. I see Oceania. Oceania, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the Secretariat for the preparation of this paper and the considerable and valuable work that they've put in providing Animals Committee with information in Annexes 3 and 4 in particular. And also would like to thank Traffic and Deakin University for their detailed paper deep diving into the shark catch and trade mismatches issue, which followed on from an earlier study by Traffic on missing sharks. And I look forward to having discussions within the working group on that particular paper. I also note that 17 parties and an NGO responded to notification 2024 number 4, requesting updated information related to the conservation and management of sharks. And again, that is something I look forward to hearing more about during the working group meeting. Obviously, we have a major task of helping the review of SIG trade. This is the first time that sharks have been in the review of significant trade, and it's only, I guess, the second time that we've had species country combinations in the review of SIG trade. So this is sort of new waters, I suppose, that we're treading this time round. And as the Secretary mentioned, we've also got that issue of looking at reporting, especially catches in areas beyond national jurisdiction into broad ocean basins as well. So we have a large workload for the working group, and I look forward to a productive session over the next 2 or 3 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Oceania. I see North America. You have asked for the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The North American region would like to thank the Secretariat for this document. We greatly appreciate information and updates, including the study on the mismatch between report and expect trade in CITES list shark species. The North American region generally supports the Secretariat's recommendations contained in paragraph 15 of this document based on this study. However, the North American region has a question about the recommendation on paragraph 15F. This paragraph invites the Secretariat to propose clear guidance on the reporting of specimens taken in areas beyond national jurisdiction. The North American region will appreciate an explanation on what guidance is being proposed, as we are unsure additional guidance is needed. With regards to the Secretary's suggestion to add ocean basins to the guidelines for the preparation and submission of CITES annual reports, the North American region sees the value in reporting this information for the catch of CITES list shark species. If there is an agreement to report this information, our region agrees with the Secretariat that option 1 would be the most feasible and practicable option. With respect to other recommendations put forward for consideration by the Secretariat in this document, our region supports directing the Animals Committee to draft recommendations and decisions for submissions for the 78th meeting of the Standing Committee in an in-session working group. Our region believes it's important that any such recommendations and decisions focus on key priorities. In particular, we support directing the Animals Committee to draft recommendations and decisions calling for actions that support parties with CITES implementations and compliance issues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, North America. Any other member wishing to take the floor? So with this, I open the floor for observer parties. I see the Netherlands. Netherlands, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time the Netherlands takes the floor, we would like to thank the Secretariat for their unfailing hard work and the preparation for the meeting. Our thanks also go to our hosts, the Swiss government, and to you, Chair, for your leadership as Chair of the Animals Committee. We would also like to thank the Secretariat for the clear and comprehensive documents for Agenda Point 41 and have a suggestion for a possible addition, although fully understanding the current heavy workload. With regard to Articles 13 and 14 of Resolution Conf 12.6, Rev Cop 18, on conservation and management of sharks, and referencing document AC 33 Inf 20 on deep water sharks, we would like to ask if a discussion on the conservation and management of deep water sharks could be added to the AC dialogue and to the mandate of an eventual working group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Netherlands. We had that on our radar. So we will propose some wording in the mandate. I now see Japan. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And Japan would like to express its appreciation to the Secretariat for the preparation of the document, and including the submission by parties and organizations. Under the CITES framework, Japan has made some reservations on listed shark species, but shark species are very important to Japanese fisheries, and we will continue to contribute the sustainable use of these precious stocks based on the decisions by the relevant regional fisheries management bodies. And Japan welcomes the contribution of CITES to the conservation and sustainable use of CITES listed shark species, and Japan generally supports the draft recommendations made by the Secretariat described in the draft in the paragraph 15. However, Japan would like to propose an amendment to paragraph B of the recommendation, taking into account the mandate of CITES. And the proposed text is invite parties to adapt traceability systems along the supply chain of CITES listed shark and ray species for international trade, as appropriate, as noting the decision of traceability which has been agreed by the parties to CITES and future guidance, further guidance. So adding shark and ray between listed and species, then adding for international trade, as appropriate after species. So there are three reasons of the amendment. First, we clearly talk about shark and rays here. And second, domestic trade in products of CITES listed species that are not traded internationally and used domestically goes beyond to the mandate of this convention. And finally, the pre-convention specimens are not necessarily traceable for the trade before the CITES listings become effective. And regarding the paragraph 19C with the draft recommendations, Japan supports the opinion of the option 1 as stated by North America, which provides 7 divisions with high seas for the same reasons of the Secretariat, which is simple and will add a minimum burden on parties, including in the reporting. In addition, although the Secretariat interprets that this reporting applies to specimens taken from ABNJ, but Japan would like to confirm that with the Secretariat that information on the location of catches taken in the national jurisdiction may also be reported in the annual report based on the option which we decide. Thank you very much,
can you please conclude? Oh, you just concluded. Okay, very good. Okay, thank you. Now I have Argentina. Argentina, you have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you, sir. With respect to the database relating to sharks and the conversations the Secretariat has had with the FAO in order to ensure complementarity and to ensure that the information in the database is usefully organized for parties, we would like to say that we would suggest that this database include an update of what we have from our relevant ministries, which will include all of the appendix listed species that are covered by our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. I see Ecuador. Ecuador, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. We would like to thank the Secretariat for having prepared this document, but we would like to make some comments with respect to Annex 5. We don't think that the document has concerned public information on Ecuador's data with respect to the relevant resolution on the conservation of sharks that are captured as bycatch. We should provide this on an annual basis, as is shown in Table 9 of the Annex. And we don't think that the information as it is presented enables parties to double-check the information provided. With comparing the FAO and Ecuador's data presentation, we have to deal with the fact that different criteria are used. Some data provides only export data, whereas the FAO provides representative fisheries data. These different approaches can lead to discrepancies, and this means that we need a data harmonization approach if we're hoping to really have a good way of comparing what we get from data, and by way of data from different organizations. The catch and export of rays and sharks has to be provided in a way that allows us to get an overall picture. We think it's necessary to have some capacity building with respect to the data gathering initiatives. We need to have annual reports in the A, B, and J zones, but we need to look in greater detail at the whole question of beyond national jurisdiction, particularly with respect to standardized data. And we do hope that we'll be able to tackle these issues in the working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Ecuador. I do not really want to preempt the discussions of the working group, so please be brief. And if you have issues you want to have discussed in the working group, just note them so that you will have the chance to go through them thoroughly in the working group. I see Panama. Panama, you have asked for the floor.
Thank you, sir. As this is the first time we've taken the floor, we would like to thank you for the opportunity to participate in this work. At the Panama CITES COP in 2022, a proposal was made that was adopted, and it was decided that the 27 species of sharks and rays would be Appendix-II listed. The inclusion of new species of those sharks in international trade, we now have that trade under control, and we hope that countries are actually complying with CITES obligations. In 23, Panama, with the FAO and other organizations, assessed 2 species of sharks and then ended up with a negative NDF for hammerhead sharks and a positive one for blue sharks. We have also worked with different organizations to see that there is a need for scientific information on populations and their catch and export. we have decided to follow the example of countries that have taken preventive measures and to have a zero quota for the export of sharks and rays. This is a way of reasserting our commitment to the conservation of species and protecting the ecosystem. This zero quota is going to be maintained until we have successful population monitoring systems of these populations that are subject to export. The FAO has shown that between 2013 and 20, the region of the Americas is a source of exports for sharks, and there's a very high number of exports, over 100,000 tons of sharks that are sent by Asian trading centers in that period. And this means that 30,000 metric tons come from Latin America in the figures provided. Now, clearly, some countries in the region have very high export volumes, and there are some 2,000-ton differences from some countries to others. There is a need to ensure that the Pacific region is carefully studied so that we find ways of seriously changing the situation, and we need to ensure that there is no further exporting of a species in a way that threatens the shark population, because we need to ensure that there is enough done to protect the ecosystems. And we welcome what work has been done, the good work that is done by traffic on this. As we are That's it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And you will have the opportunity in the working group to make more statements, so no, don't worry. Okay, I see Australia. Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Australia generally supports the recommendations and looks forward to engaging in the working group. Without preempting the working group, Australia has procedural and operational concerns with the Secretariat's proposal to include catch location reporting in annual reports. While we acknowledge that such reporting may be useful for understanding trade in shark and ray by region, and ultimately may underpin enhanced management and analysis of the location of harvests, we have concerns that this issue is an implementation matter and should be considered first by the Standing Committee. Nonetheless, the Animals Committee could advise on the best option for recording and reporting catch data. Such a discussion could include consideration of the most practical and biologically appropriate option, although this is complex as shark and ray populations do not conform with lines on maps. Furthermore, what may be optimal solution for one species is unlikely to apply more broadly to sharks and rays as a group. In procedural and operational contexts, the Conference of the Parties would presumably need to agree to amendments to permit formats so that location information can be captured, and every party would need to modify both their permit application form and their electronic permit assessment systems. Such changes would likely come at considerable resourcing costs for parties and should be considered when we make our recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Australia. I think that will be considered in the working group, and the working group can easily make recommendations to the Standing Committee to look at particular issues. That's what we often do, so I think that there's no hindrance on that. I don't see anybody else asking for the floor, so may I maybe ask Europe to now propose some issues that might help the discussions in the RST working group for consideration by the working group on sharks? Europe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would propose that question 1, based on the best available information, is it feasible to request a stock-based NDF for the shark species in the review of significant trade? And I want to add, should the answer be yes for some of them, then we would like to know for which of them. Question 2, request 2, formulate feasible and practical recommendations on making NDFs that could be included in the review of significant trade recommendation. Number 3, formulate recommendations for parties that are fishing in shared stocks to help them coordinate sustainable offtake levels. It would be very helpful to have a sentence that fits into Table 2 as an element. If there are additional elements or longer text, it's fine, but to get something for Table 2 would be most helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Europe. I don't see anybody else. I see, yes, I haven't opened the floor for observer organizations yet, so I give the floor to WCS. Has asked for the floor? You're out of the list again. Okay.
Thank you. Sorry I hit the button too soon. Thank you very much, and we will not take time away from discussions and input into the working group. We just wish to suggest consideration in the mandate of the Shark Working Group, in addition to what has already been articulated by the Europe rep, the inclusion of paragraphs 10 and 11 of document 14.3 Rev 1. There's very good discussion there on the issues of taking from shared stocks, areas beyond national jurisdiction, country versus ocean basin of origin. So we would suggest inclusion in the mandate of the working group, comments on the issues raised in paragraphs 10 and 11 of document 14.3. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, WCS. Now give me a couple of minutes to wrap this all together, that we do have a clear mandate for this working group that I will strike afterwards. Okay. So first, before I go to the mandate, I would give the floor to the Secretary to respond to the North American region in relation to paragraph 15, letter F, because you have asked for an explanation there. And just also to note that we have incorporated the changes proposed by Japan to this paragraph as proposed. Okay, now Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the North American region for the question. Paragraph 15, paragraph F, which reads, invite the Secretary to propose clear guidance on the reporting of specimens taken from ABNJ, refers to added guidance to be included in the guidelines for the preparation and submission of CITES annual reports, and it will of course be presented to the Standing Committee, which will then make the decision on what to be included. I hope that clarifies. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so I see Oceania. Oceania, you have asked for the floor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to refer to agenda item number 17 that covers some of these issues as well. We're reporting on the workshop on ABNJ as well, so that's extra guidance for us.
Okay, thank you. So with this, I would now read out the mandate of the in-session working group on sharks. So this in-session working group shall A, consider the issues raised in paragraphs 10 and 11 of document AC33 Doc 14.3 Ref 1 concerning shark species that were selected for stage 2 of the review of significant trade and make recommendations concerning the treatment of multiple stocks for the same species and single stocks being harvested by multiple harvesting nations for sharks. B, consider the questions raised by the representative of Europe in plenary in relation to RSD process. C, consider document AC33 Doc 41 Ref 1, including the scientific elements in its annexes and any other relevant information, and I, review the responses to the notification to the parties in Annex 2 and the information from the CITES trade database on commercial trade in CITES listed sharks and rays since 2010, presented in Annex 3. I review the study and its recommendations conducted under decision 19.223, paragraph C, as shown in paragraph 15. I review the Secretariat's suggestions for adding ocean basins to the guidelines for the preparation and submission for CITES annual reports shown in paragraphs 22 to 28. And Roman 4, draft recommendations and decisions to be submitted to the 78th meeting of the Standing Committee for its consideration. Then letter D, consider the information presented in AC33 Inf 2020 and make species-specific recommendations, if necessary, on improving the conservation status of deep-water sharks. And E, report its recommendations to the committee. I hope I have captured everything. I see Oceania.
Sorry, Chair, I may have missed it, but I don't recall reference to the shark mismatch paper or the deep dive paper in Annex 5. It may have been there.
That is Roman 2, review the study and its recommendations conducted under decision 19223. That's the one. I open the floor for observer parties. And/or observer organizations. Okay, so I think we have that mandate, and good luck. We will hear back. Okay. So we now move on to the next agenda. I think I have to strike the working group as well. Absolutely. So it will be chaired by our dear representative from Oceania. And who from the members will participate in that working group? You can press your button. Asia. Okay, I open the floor for observer parties. As before, when I have read out your name, please press your button again so that you go off the list. India, Ecuador, Peru, Japan, Switzerland, Canada, France, Netherlands, China, the Maldives, Portugal, Germany, South Africa, the UK, United States, Republic of Korea, Australia, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Tanzania, Brazil, Mexico, the EU, Spain, Suriname, Indonesia, Kenya, Austria, Hungary, Ghana, DRC, Panama, Oman, Mozambique, New Zealand, and Thailand. So it's almost everyone, but that's fine.
Maybe on Senegal, if they... because they're one of the countries.
Maybe I open now the floor for observer organizations. FAO, WCS, Zoo Australasia, Defenders of Wildlife, WWF, IUCN, Blue Resources Trust, Traffic, CMS, Shark Conservation Fund, UNEP WCMC, Save Our Seas, EBCD, Florida University, HSI, IFF, CFDEC, GGT, ZSL, SUCO SA, IFAW, Franz Weber Foundation, Bloom and Cartagena and Senegal. Okay. I was hoping you would come because I think you are also concerned as a party. So good. I've gotten you. You are SEA FTC. CITES. Okay, good. Good. You're in the group. Okay. So we are balanced, and this working group will meet, as we said, on Tuesday morning. So tomorrow morning in this room, as well as the... No, it's not in this room. Can you tell me?
We need a new room because of the size, so we will
okay. Okay, we will have to find a room that is as big that you can all fit in, and there will be a list of the working groups and the places where to go scheduled. It will be posted on the website, so you can always see where it will take place. We will most likely be able to announce it in the afternoon already. Okay. So that's it for sharks, and we can now move on to agenda item 48, report of the specialist on zoological nomenclature. Peter Paul, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Document AC33, Doc 48, in front of us, provides an update on nomenclatural work since we last met in person at AC32 last year. At AC32, we established an intersessional working group on animal nomenclature, whose members were consulted on some of the topics under consideration. Document 48 is a complex document, and as I recommend establishing an in-session working group, I will keep my introductory remarks relatively short. The elephant in the nomenclature room is described in paragraphs 5 to 15. There is general consensus that there is scientific justification for the recognition of two distinct species of elephants in Africa, which have for a long time been recognized as distinct subspecies by CITES. But there is no consensus yet on how this updated species status should be shown in the appendices. The results of the deliberations in Saturday morning sessions of the joint committees have provided some clarity towards this matter, which I anticipate we can discuss in detail in the in-session working group. Concerning decision 19.278 on the nomenclature of bird names, progress is described in paragraph 16 to 21. In the time since AC32, it has become evident that significant progress has been made by the leading bird checklist teams to join forces and produce a single, agreed, global standard checklist of birds. This list is expected to be available towards the end of this year and will supersede the HBW/BI checklist of the birds of the world. In these circumstances, it appears prudent to suspend work towards adoption by CITES of this HBW/BI checklist of the birds of the world, and instead await this new global checklist. Document 48 further provides information and suggestions concerning a possible updated checklist for turtles and tortoises, a newly prepared checklist for all CITES listed fishes, and attached as Annex 1, and a checklist for CITES listed sea cucumbers, which is attached as Annex 2. Finally, as always, there is a substantial set of loose potential nomenclatural updates based on individual peer-reviewed scientific papers and affecting just one or a few CITES-listed species. These are tabulated in Annex 3. Many of the intersessional working group members have expressed their views on these potential updates, and an information document with their consolidated responses should ideally be available later today in preparation for the working group's review in detail. Therefore, as mentioned before, I invite the Chair and Committee to establish an in-session working group to discuss these matters further. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Nomenclature Specialist. You have heard the introduction, you have the document in front of you, and there will be a working group dealing with all of these matters. So I open the floor for any comments from members. North America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Nomenclature Specialist for preparing this document and all of the hard work on CITES nomenclature issues. Given the large number of items covered in this document, as well as the complexity of some of the items, the North American region supports the establishment of an in-session working group to discuss the recommendations detailed in the document. While recognizing that the zoological nomenclature is dynamic and subject to new scientific insight, we would like to note that our region generally supports a thoughtful and conservative approach to nomenclature changes, given the logistics of implementing such changes to a large number of taxa at any given time. It can result in technical challenges and to a significant workload for management authorities, which impacts on scientific authorities, enforcement officers, and the public as well. Accordingly, when considering many of these changes, we'll also consider whether or not the lack of taxonomy agreement regarding them is actually impacting CITES controls and effectiveness, and whether or not there is an actual agreement among the experts on the change proposed. According to Resolution 12.11, Rep. COP 19, on the standard nomenclature, in the case where a proposed amendment to the nomenclature status of a taxon is still under discussion, the new taxonomy should not be adopted. We look forward to participating in the in-session working group and discussing issues and recommendations outlined in the document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, North America. Any other comments from members? Europe, you have the floor.
In regard to the standard nomenclature for birds, I want to caution against suspending the work of adopting the illustrated checklist of birds of the world as new standard reference. If the consolidated list that is expected to be available early 2025 is not finished or completed in time, or is not meeting the expectations of CITES, we would be without any option for COP20. And in this regard, I think it could be useful to continue the work and then have two options on the table to choose among them. Thank you.
Thank you, Europe. I think this is a precautionary approach which could be quite wise, because we don't know how it's going to end up. So, yes. I see Africa has asked for the floor. Africa, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. We'd like to thank the nomenclature specialist for this very full report, and we'd like to support the standardized nomenclature as recommended and the references mentioned in the document. However, on reading the notes of the 77th Standing Committee, we think it might be too early to decide if the two elephant species should be listed. It's quite clear in terms of the genera, but that it can be listed as a change of nomenclature, but we don't need a proposal for that. So I think we should have recommendations on the nomenclature references to be used and to put up to date the taxonomy in Appendix-I with the annotations that exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Africa. Just to note that we do not need to open this debate here now. You will have the possibility to talk about elephants in the working group. It will be dealt with there in detail. So please do not start this discussion in here. You will have the chance to do so in the working group. I see Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, we would like to join the suggestions made by the representative for Europe. There's been a great deal of work on bird references, and to suspend work now might be premature. We suggest that we maintain the status quo so that we can report to the next COP. And I'm saying this now because it may be that Mexico may not be able to participate in the working group, so we'd like our comment to be taken into account when discussions are held. Thank you.
Thank you. I think our colleague from Nomenclature has taken note of that. I don't see any other party asking for the floor, so I see North America. North America, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just to associate with what the colleague of Europe expressed on birds matters. Thank you.
Thank you, North America. I now see Senegal. Senegal, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. We simply wish to support what the delegate for Africa said earlier. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senegal. I have Cameroon. Cameroon, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. We, too, would like to express our support for the proposal made by the representative of Africa on the whole question of elephants. This, since Cameroon has the two species that do appear in the document. Thank you.
Cameroon. I open now the floor for observer organizations. HSI, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was a member of the Nomenclature Working Group, and also I prepared was a consultant for the Secretariat for the original comparison between the 4th edition of Howard and Moore and the HBW BirdLife checklist. First of all, I would like to, again, thank the nomenclature specialist for his usual excellent work. And again, though I have no problem with the suggestion made by the delegate from Europe, I recently had a chance just last month to speak to one of the coordinators of the new unified checklist, who informed me that although there are a number of taxonomic decisions outstanding, this approach to this unified checklist has now been agreed by basically everybody who is working, who has produced one of the current checklists that are out there, the major groups that are doing this. The hope is to have a version as early, perhaps as the end of this year. I would hope that there would be an opportunity somehow for, as soon as this report appears, or this publication appears, to do a comparison with the HBW checklist to see just what the differences are, perhaps enumerate them. I suspect that there will be probably more of an approach towards lumping, my understanding is, than perhaps the HBW checklist has used. And so that by the time we get to the Conference of the Parties, there is some good information on what the new checklist actually says and what changes it will require and how it differs from the HBW checklist. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, HSI. I now come back to Kenya. Please be brief. We have to advance. So, Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We thank the Zoological Nomenclature Specialist for the important role he continues to play in the implementation of the Convention, and for preparing this document for consideration by the Animals Committee. We would like to comment on the recommendations on the taxon African elephant contained in paragraph 34B. We do not agree with that recommendation that Loxodonta cyclostis should be listed as a split from the populations of Loxodonta africana. And this is the position that we will take to the working group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Senegal.
Thank you, sir. With respect to the nomenclature group, will there be interpretation available when the group meets so that French-speaking countries with significant elephant populations might be able to participate in the meeting?
To answer the question from Senegal, we have foreseen to have a specific time for this topic to be looked at, and we will have somebody from the Secretariat in the room who will be able to translate, but we don't have official translation because we only can have it in this room here. And the nomenclature work will not be, the working group will not meet in this room, but we will do our best to support our French-speaking colleagues that they can provide their views and to also hear what is being said. So we will do our best to accommodate this topic. Okay, I think we will make that mandate pretty easy and short. Don't think we need to list all the matters, and the Animals Committee agrees to establish an in-session working group with the mandate to consider the recommendations in paragraph 34 of Doc AC 33, Doc 48, and report back to the Animals Committee. Is that good, Chair? Very good. I think that covers all the aspects that have been raised and that will be looked at. So that would be the mandate, and as usual, it will be, of course, chaired by our dear colleague, the nomenclature specialist for fauna, Peter Paul van Dijk, and I now open the floor for expressions of interest from members. I see Africa. I'm not at parties yet, so I will come back to parties. So members is Africa, okay. I open now the floor for observer parties. I see China, United States, France, Kenya, Togo, Israel, Japan, Zimbabwe, Senegal, Germany, South Africa, Russian Federation, DRC, EU, UK, Botswana, Namibia, Tanzania, Cameroon, Portugal, and Ghana. and Europe as, regionally. Yes. I've rarely seen such a big nomenclature working group.
We need a bigger room for this one as well.
You will be feeling well. Now I open the floor for expression of interest from observer organizations. I have IUCN, WCS, Center of Biological Diversity, HSI, AZA, Pan-African Sanctuary, Safari Club International, UNEP WCMC, EIA UK, IWMC, Parrot Breeders Association of South Africa, CMS, EASA, Conservation Force, Traffic, Associación Brazil, Ranching SA, SUCO, South Africa, WASA, Provide Life, IFF, German Herpetological Society, IFO, BNAEV, ADM Capital, and Swan, yes. So we have 23 parties and members and 26 organizations. So please, among the can you please all clear the ones that still have green, please push your buttons so that we have a clear screen. This is Pan-African Sanctuary, Conservation Force and Provide Life. Please press your button again so that you are off the list. Very good, thank you. So we have 3 organizations too many, so please consult with each other who can be represented by others. I see EASA, are you withdrawing? Okay, I have EASA, Traffic, EIA UK and ADM Capital who are withdrawing from the working group. So thank you very much for your indulgence. So we now have a balance. Very good. Thank you very much. So with this we have struck that working group, and the next agenda item to look at is trade in stony corals. It is agenda item 24, and I give the floor to to our representative from Central South America and the Caribbean, Mauro Congor. You have the floor to introduce the document.
The AC 33-24. It was prepared by the Secretariat. At its 19th meeting, COP19 Panama 2022, the Conference of Parties adopted decisions 19.177 and 19.178 on trade in stony corals. Sorry, just a minute, please. At this 32nd meeting of the Animals Committee, AC 32 Geneva in June 2023, the committee considered documents AC 32 Doc 23.1 and AC 32 Doc 23.2 which was submitted by the chair of the Animals Committee, and Sweden on behalf of the European Union. So the Animals Committee established an in-session working group on trade on stony corals with the mandate to draft a notification to the parties concerning the implementation of Decision 19.177, seeking advice from coral reef nations and coral experts Sea Summary Record AC32SR. So on July 12, 2023, at the request of the Animals Committee, the Secretariat issued notification to the parties number 2023/081, inviting parties, especially coral reef nations, to express an interest in participating in the Animals Committee Intersessional Working Group on Trade in Stony Corals, and further inviting stony coral experts and other stakeholders to express their interest in contributing to the work of the working group. So the Animals Committee established an in-session working group on trade with the mandate to, well, sorry, this notification is already done, sorry. So after the notification, detailed responses were received from 8 member states or parties: Australia, China, Colombia, the European Union, Germany, Mexico, New Zealand, United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, including Cayman Islands, and the United States of America. The working group has really not had an opportunity to meet, and it was the Secretariat that did the compiling, much of the compiling of the responses from the parties. And the recommendation is to continue to consult in advance of the next Conference of Parties or the next Animals Committee meeting, and to provide an update. So furthermore, the Animals Committee is invited to consider establishing an in-session working group to consider the proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 11.10, Rev COP 15, and Sections 3 and 6A of the guidelines for the preparation and submission of CITES annual reports, and Section 4A of the guidelines for the preparation and submission of CITES annual illegal reports, and further recommendations from the Intersessional Working Group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Central, South America and the Caribbean. I now open the floor for comments from members of the Animals Committee. I open the floor for observer parties who wish to take the floor. I don't see any party asking for the floor. You know, if I don't see any appetite to discuss what's being proposed, I will have to presume that you agree with what is being proposed. So if I don't see any appetite for a working group, for me that is fine. But we will have to come back to that. So now I don't see any party asking for the floor, so I have opened the floor for observer organizations, so European Pet Organization.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me the floor. EPO welcomes continued efforts to review and amend Resolution 1110, Trade in Stony Coral, and welcome the recommendation in AC Document 24 to establish an in-session working group to discuss proposed amendments. We'd like to express our interest in attending this working group, also on behalf of the Ornamental Aquatic Trade Association, the Pet Industry Association of Australia, and the Sustainable Users Network. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now I see several parties. I see Australia. Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Australia is a significant coral exporting nation, and it supports most of the proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 11.10, Rev Cop 15. Australia is of the view that a definition for fossilised corals is needed to avoid interpretation issues and support consistency. Australia notes that current wording of the guidelines gives rise to ambiguities and can lead to coral reporting errors where coral trade terms are incorrectly reported. Australia therefore supports the intent behind the proposed revisions to the guidelines in Annex-II as a step towards clarifying definitions associated with coral product terms and codes to minimise possible confusion around interpretation and need of these codes. We note that some of the amendments currently proposed in Annex-II will require some further discussion to avoid creating more confusion. We propose this work will need further time and support and propose this recommendation be put to the Standing Committee to be decided upon. Sorry, I'll try and keep it brief, but we would support the creation of an in-session working group and look forward to engaging further there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's what I wanted to hear. So now we will be able to strike a working group, which is okay. Good. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you. The United States aligns with Australia in supporting the establishment of an in-session working group at AC 33. The detailed responses received from parties and non-governmental organizations to Notification 2023/081 concerning the implementation of Decision 19.177 included in Annex 3 of AC 33, Doc 24, require further discussion in order to achieve consensus on possible amendments and recommendations to present to the Standing Committee at SC 78. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate Spain on exceptional wins yesterday in the men's tennis at Wimbledon and in the football. I'm extremely grateful that the game didn't go to penalties. We also support the formation of an in-session working group, request to be a member of that group. Our assessments are included in the document. However, we encourage to focus on content that really best adds clarity and assists in implementation for stony corals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. I open the floor now to Israel.
Thank you, Chair. As a party represented here by just one person, I can't be in all the working groups. I have a very short comment on the content, which I hope will come up at the working group. And this is on the definitions in the annex. In two of the definitions, the ones on live coral and on substrate, there's a sentence that's been proposed to add that says, in live rock, it says, live rock should not be covered by CITES listed coral species. And in substrate, a similar sentence, substrate should not be covered by CITES listed live or dead coral. The use of the word covered here is very confusing because I'm not sure if you're talking about how they are covered biologically or if you're talking about covered by the rules, or it's just a poorly worded sentence, at least in English, so Karen's nodding her head. So I would hope the working group can work on that a little bit and fix up the clarity of what that really means. Thank you.
Thank you for that input. I think it's been well noted. I now see ornamental fish. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We align ourselves with our colleague from the European Pet Organization and a representative from various countries that already have spoken and consider that the revisions on Res Conf 1110, Rev Cop 15 on trade in stony corals are timely and highly necessary despite the enormous quantity of work over many years that went into shaping the original document. The nature of the modern trade in corals is in many aspects significantly different from what it was 15 years ago, and we are looking forward to bring in our knowledge of the trade to make recommendations that are practical and relevant for the products in trade, while at the same time providing meaningful data on the volume of trade. The current document definitely needs further discussion, and we support the formation of a working group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And finally, I have UNEP WCMC. No, I have Oceania who has asked for the floor. Oceania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would happily go after UNEP WCMC on this matter. It's just a point of clarification. Thanks.
Okay, UNEP WCMC, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. UNEP WCMC responded to notification to the parties number 2023/81 via email in August 2023, and although our submission was not included in the compilation of responses in Annex 3 to AC 33 Doc 24, we do wish to highlight one concern. And this is in relation to the suggested change to a column in the guidelines for the preparation and submission of annual reports from alternative unit to additional unit. Whilst we very much support the intent of the proposed change in order to better monitor the impact of coral trade, we are concerned that changing the guidance in this way would lead to less consistent reporting, particularly as the proposed change in the guidance would not only relate to coral taxa but to all CITES listed species. It would be likely to result in some parties reporting trade in one unit and other parties reporting trade in 2 units, making trade analysis with a greater variety of term unit combinations more difficult overall. In addition, there would be knock-on implications for management of the CITES trade database and its outputs. We therefore suggest that additional approaches could be considered in the in-session working group. For example, one approach could be to develop new term codes that incorporate the size of a live coral specimen in trade that would be similar to existing codes for leather product large and leather product small. So namely, these could be live coral large and live coral small. Size thresholds would, of course, need to be carefully considered. In addition, in relation to decision 19.777C, requesting advice on appropriate conversion factors used for the analysis of CITES trade in corals, we welcome the submission from Australia, which provides weight conversions for 18 coral taxa in trade. And these data indicate that the conversion factors that were developed by Green and Shirley in 1999, used in analysis to inform the review of the significant trade process, are out of date. And wider review of appropriate conversion factors for coral trade is needed. And finally, Chair, we just would like to indicate our willingness to join in an in-session working group. Thank you.
Thank you, UNEP WCMC. I now give the floor to Oceania.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to seek your indulgence, I guess. There was a member of the drafting group at AC 32 and also a member of the intersessional working group, as well, Ros Patterson from Provision Reef, which is a non-governmental organisation in Oceania, who would have attended this meeting, except she was involved in a vehicle accident. And so she has sent me a submission, which I will pass on to the chair of the working group, if that is okay, it's within order. Thank you.
Thank you, Oceania. I think this is in order. It comes from the regional rep and will support the work of this working group. So, of course, yes. Okay, so I think we will have that working group. And so the mandate of this in-session working group reads as follows. Taking into account the discussions in the plenary, the working group shall A. Consider the proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 1110, Ref Cop 15, and Sections 3 and 6A of the Guidelines for the Preparation and Submission of CITES Annual Reports, and Section 4A of the Guidelines for the Preparation and Submission of CITES Annual Illegal Trade Reports, and B, report its recommendations to the committee. So it's pretty straightforward mandate. Don't see anybody opposing, so I think that will be the mandate. Chair of the working group will be our colleague from Central and South America and the Caribbean, Mauro Congora. Who is interested from the members to participate in that working group? Observer parties, Austria, United States, Australia, Canada, India, Portugal, New Zealand, the Netherlands, UK, China, the Maldives, the EU, Zimbabwe, and Malaysia. And Indonesia. I now open the floor for interests of observer organizations. So European Pet Organization, Zoo Australasia, Center of Biological Diversity, AZA, FAO, UNEP WCMC, Pet Advocacy, Ornamental Fish, and Franz Weber Foundation, and Cartagena. Okay, we may have to add another point of mandate. I think WCMC mentioned the topic on conversion factors, which is not really included into what I read out as a mandate now. So if you see merit in including that into the mandate as well, I need to have some. Okay, I see the chair nodding. So we would add. Provide advice on the conversion factors used to analyze trade in corals for the review of significant trade process. So that mandate would be added to the working group's mandate. Okay? Very good. With this, I think we can move on to the last agenda item of this morning, which is eels. It is document AC33. Document 40 on eels, and it will be introduced by the co-chair of the intercession working group, the representative from Europe. Gerald, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The working group consisted of 16 parties and 9 IGOs and NGOs, the names of which can be found in paragraph 4 of document AC33, Doc 40. Some of them invested a lot of time in producing and refining the outputs, and in the name of all 3 co-chairs, I want to thank all of them for the workload and for finding a common ground even on controversial topics. In regard to task A of the mandate, the Secretariat thankfully provided a consolidated summary of the responses received to the notifications 2021-18 and 2023-62, including updates provided under Decision 19-218. All these responses can be found in the annex to document 40 of AC33. the working group agreed that the recommendations of the Secretariat, that there are important gaps in knowledge for certain countries, specifically Egypt, Turkey and China, make it recommendable to have decisions aimed at fulfilling these gaps, and it would be helpful. But it also was noted that these parties could still provide information before the Standing Committee, which could make decisions or considerations about specific decisions unnecessary. The working group had extensive discussions about Task B of the mandate concerning the potential use of source code R for specimens of European eels from aquaculture production systems. Based on the 3 criteria for the definition of ranging in Resolution 11.16 Rev COP 15, the working group agreed on 3 main conclusions. Number 1, aquaculture of eels, which is based on confinement, the provision of food and water treatment, complies with the definition of a controlled environment. In contrast, translocating young eels to another biotope where they live on natural resources does not provide a controlled environment and can therefore not be considered as ranging. On-growing eels in ponds is an intermediary situation which has to be assessed according to the amount of human intervention. Number 2, aquaculture of Anguilla starts with on-growing of wild glass eels or elevers, which are more than 1 year old. While there is no specific definition of what a juvenile is in anguillids, in the context of the life history of these species, it is reasonable to consider glass eels and elevers to be so. In this regard, aquaculture of eels complies with the criterion that ranging is based on offtake of eggs or juveniles from the wild. Number 3, the glass and yellow eel stage of Anguilla does not have an intrinsic high mortality rate or generally a very low probability of surviving to adulthood. But recruitment beyond the carrying capacity of habitats can cause mortality rates which are in compliance with the definition of ranging. Survivability in aquaculture broadly matches the chance of glass eels surviving to adulthood under favorable natural conditions. Considering the broad variability in survivability, it seems to be impossible to generalize whether the mortality of eels removed at the glass eels or liver stage for on-growing fits the criteria stated in Resolution 11.16 Rev COP 15 of having a very low probability of surviving to adulthood. Accurate decisions can only be made on a case-by-case basis and regional assessments. In addition, the working group agreed that an assessment about the use of source code R for European eels should also consider that presently some on-grown eels are traded under source code R and others under source code W. And using these source codes for eels according to agreed criteria would likely help improve reporting. The source code R transfers useful information about the origin of specimens, but the theoretical usefulness of source code R for trade in eels is diminished by the practical challenge of distinguishing adult specimens harvested from the wild from on-grown specimens, thus providing an opportunity for wildlife laundering. The working group also emphasized that the eventual usefulness of source code R for trade in Anguilla does not allow any prediction about the general sustainability of harvesting eels from a specific biotope, which should also consider sexual balance and fitness of escaped silver eels. Whether and to which extent rearing juvenile eels has less impact on populations than harvesting adult eels can only be determined by comparing the survivability in a specific natural biotope and the capability of a specific rearing facility. Such data are presently not available and will probably vary considerably. Therefore, aquaculture of eels has been regarded by some parties as not complying with the criterion for ranging. Making regional positive NDFs for trade under source code R is complicated by the fact that Anguilla is a critical endangered species with a decreasing population trend, which occurs in a single global population, and by biological factors such as density-dependent sex determination and survivability. In this respect, the advice of ICES should be borne in mind that based on a precautionary approach, there should be 0 catches in all habitats in 2024. This applies to recreational and commercial catches and includes catches of glass eels for restocking and aquaculture. Concerning paragraph C of the mandate, the working group compiled a list of topics that might be considered for inclusion in a potential resolution on eels and concluded that a possible resolution should cover the entire genus, as it is not possible to separate the problems associated with the implementation of the listing of Anguilla from wider issues. The committee is invited to consider conveying this list of topics for consideration by the Standing Committee's Intersessional Working Group on Eels in the context of a possible resolution on eels. In regard to the potential risks and benefits of introducing seized live European eels to the wild, the working group suggested that the Animals Committee produces a draft decision to undertake this task post-COP20. In summary, the task of the Animals Committee the task that the Animals Committee is now invited is to consider are outlined in paragraph 16 of the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Europe, for the introduction to the document. You have heard we are asked to look at the recommendations in document AC 33, doc 14 in paragraph 16. So I open the floor for any comments from members. I see North America. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. First, the North American region would like to thank the co-chairs of the Intersessional Working Group on Eels for the hard work in preparing this document, and to the working group for the recommendations put forward for the Animals Committee considerations. The North American region generally supports the recommendations included in paragraph 16 of this document for consideration by the Standing Committee at its 78 meeting and by the Conference of the Parties at its 20 meeting as appropriate. The North American region also supports the conclusions of the working group concerning the potential use of source code R ranching, particularly in paragraph 11T, stating that it's impossible to generalize whether mortality of glass eels and elvers removed from the wild for growing before being traded fits the criteria state in Resolution Conf 11.16 of having a very low probability of surviving to adulthood. As a reminder, the Animals Committee at its 32nd meeting recommended that the Global Expert Workshop on Non-Determined Findings consider guidelines for the making of NDFs for specimens on marine source from ranching operations as proposed in AC 32.25.2 on considerations and recommendations for ranching of marine species submitted by the U.S. and report back on this issue to the Animals Committee and its 33rd meeting. Recommendations, however, are not present in the NDF draft guidance in Module 5. NDFs for marine and aquatic species currently available on CITES website and are not discussed in document AC Doc 16 on non-determined findings. Nevertheless, it is important to make parties aware that the provisions of Articles 3, 4, and 5 of the Convention apply to ranch specimens, meaning science-based NDFs are required to trade in Appendix-I and II species when the use of source code R has been deemed appropriate. Mr. Chair, the North American region supports the consideration of the contents of paragraphs 13 and 14 by the standing committees, intersessional working group on eels concerning the potential development of a specific resolution covering all Anguilla species. However, it will be helpful to also understand more on the harvest and export of glass eels and elbers from Cuba, since Cuba did not submit a response to CITES notification 2023/62 on eels. According to a 2021 national report that Cuba submitted to the Sargasso Sea Commission for the Food Industry Business Group, GEIA, proposed a program to increase fishing and exports based on the increase in export value of live glass eels, elbers, approximately 7,000 USD per kilogram. During the 2020-21 fishing season, the number of provinces participating in elber fishery increased from 2 to 6, and the number of rivers being fished increased to 30. The North American region would like to suggest that Cuba be added to the recommendation in paragraph 14. The first bullet point, knowledge gaps, second subparagraph, Americas, as appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, North America. I don't see any other member asking for the floor, so I open the floor for comments to observer parties, and I see Germany.
Thank you, Chair. Our sincere thanks to the co-chairs and the members of the Animals Committee's Intersessional Working Group on eels for the work in this working group and for the preparation of a comprehensive document. Regarding the recommendation under paragraph 16b, related to paragraph 11 of AC Doc 40, concerning the potential use of source code R for specimens of Anguilla anguilla from agriculture production systems, we take note of the collated information, but would like to note that in our view, the use of source code R is not applicable in the case of Anguilla anguilla. As presented in Doc 40, it appears that source code R for trade meets the definition according to criteria A and B of Resolution Conf 1116, namely A, rearing in a controlled environment, and B, offtake as eggs or juveniles from the wild. However, as also presented by the co-chair of the working group and the intervention by the North America regional member, there is evidence both in Doc 40, paragraph 11T, and also other scientific literature that the third criterion C, which requires a very low probability of the harvested specimens of surviving to adulthood in the natural habitat, is not met. In particular, the glass and yellow eel stages do not have an intrinsic high mortality rate or a very low probability of surviving to adulthood in the general. Furthermore, as outlined in paragraph 11E of Doc 40, we would like to highlight that the resolution contains further helpful context when considering the purposes and usage of ranching source code. While this may not be directly applicable in the case of Anguilla due to its listing in Appendix-II, however, we strongly emphasize that potential ranching programs are meant to be primarily beneficial to the conservation of the local population of a respective species, which is not the case for the panmictic species Anguilla. Moreover, as outlined in paragraph 11V of Doc 40, the general applicability of source code R for Anguilla is not related to sustainability of trade in R specimens, highlighting the ICS advice that there should be 0 catches, including catches of glass eels for restocking at aquaculture. Sorry. Accordingly, in our view, the use of source code R is not applicable in practice in the case of Anguilla, and we recommend that the use of source code R in general is not applicable, so it is not possible to generalize whether the mortality of eels removed at the glass or alva stage for on-growing before being traded fits the criteria stated in Resolution Conf 1116. Thank you.
Thank you, Germany. I see China. China has asked for the floor. Can you give China the floor?
Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. China would like to thank the co-chairs of the intersectional working group for preparing this document. We are in the process of preparing information on use and will send it to the Secretary as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, China, for your confirmation. And now have Japan. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and I try to make my intervention short. Japan generally supports recommendations in paragraph 16A, B, and C. And regarding the recommendation in paragraph 16D, Japan believes that a list of the topics that might be considered for inclusion in a potential resolution on eels needs further discussion as described in the paragraph 14 because some of the items go beyond the mandate of CITES. In addition, Japan would like to point out that the working group did not have enough time to review the list. So therefore, Japan thinks it's very important to refine the list very carefully, in particular with regard to the mandate of the convention. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Japan. So you are not supporting the conveying of these results?
The interpreters cannot hear the chair.
To use, but do we want the work to continue?
That's exactly it. So do we want to?
The interpreters can hear you now. Thank you. The interpreters can hear you.
I give it another try. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, you're fine now. Yes, you are audible, sir.
Very good. Okay, I was asking Japan to confirm whether they are of the view that the recommendations and the topics listed in paragraph 14 should not be submitted to the standing committee, or whether it will be the standing committee looking at them and making a choice of what they want to keep.
May I speak, Mr. Chair? Yeah. May I speak? Thank you. It's okay to submit to the SC, but I think it's very important to define the risk very carefully in this SC, in particular with the mandate of the convention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I still have UK. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the chairs of the intersessional working groups for this document. The UK would encourage those parties named in paragraph 9 of the document who haven't already done so or in the process of doing so to submit information on trade in eels for consideration at SC 78. In relation to paragraph 11 and the conclusions of the working group on ranching of European eel, we note that it concluded that source code R can be appropriate for the species, that aquaculture of eels complies with the criterion for ranching, and that source code R is a useful indicator that specimens were removed for on-growing and not traded directly from the wild. Ranching should be assessed on a case-by-case basis and supported by an NDF. However, we note observed challenges too. For example, the working group summarized that the theoretical usefulness of source code R for trade in eels is diminished. And in the working group, the UK highlighted that distinguishing between sources W and R, indeed between sources in general, is a wider issue and one that is not exclusive to European eel. To this end, we suggested additional text that was omitted from the working group conclusions, very tiny text, specifically the sentence presented in paragraph 11U, III. Subsequently, a compromise sentence was agreed with the chair due to a concern that commenting on animals more generally was beyond the mandate of the working group. So the sentence that was agreed to be added was, however, distinguishing the source of refined products is not a challenge that is specific to eels. So the UK requests that this be recorded in the summary record and, if possible, included in the working group conclusions going forward, but perhaps with an amendment to remove refined source and include the word specimens instead. So thus paragraph 11 III would now read, the theoretical usefulness of source code R for trade in eels is diminished by the practical challenge of distinguishing adult specimens harvested from the wild or on-grown, thus providing an opportunity for laundering. However, distinguishing the source of specimens is not a challenge that is specific to eels. Carrying on, we support reviewing the draft decision regarding the unfinished task to discuss the potential risks and benefits of reintroducing seized live European eels into the wild. The UK supports the development of a genus-level resolution for anguillid species. We agree that the information in paragraphs 13 and 14 on an eel resolution should be submitted for consideration to the Standing Committee, where issues regarding it can be dealt with there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. I'm a bit confused because you read out the let III in letter U the way it is written now. So you want to add, however, this distinguishing source of specimens is not specific to eels. Is that what you want to add? Okay, okay. Good. And in this decision on page 8, what do you want to? You want to not to limit it to live European eels, but to eels in general? Yes, UK.
That's just really giving our support for a genus level resolution, but that can come in discussions further on. So yeah, I'm not suggesting any additions there.
Yes, I see Europe. Just in general, I think we have all seen that the information in paragraph 11 it's not, it can be used or it can not be used. So I haven't heard. What do we do with it now? Do we just note this information that it is challenging and should be used on a case-by-case basis? Because that's probably what we will have to do, and just note this fact. Or do you think we need to continue work on it? Because depending on what the feeling of the committee on that matter is, we will have to propose some way forward. But if we just note that it is challenging and has to be considered on a case-by-case basis, then we have finished the work. So I also need to get some feeling of where do we go with this matter. So with this, Europe, you have the floor.
Initially, I wanted to respond to the intervention of Japan, that the working group is well aware that this list of recommendations for a resolution is just work in progress, incomplete, and definitely needs to be refined. And it was submitted just because we hadn't a chance to complete this work. But I think the whole working group is of the same opinion as Japan, that this work needs to continue somewhere else in the standing committee also. And in regard to the question you just raised, I think we have been successful to make it clear which parameters could be considered when deciding about an application for source code R, and what information is required, in what relation it could be interpreted. And I doubt that further discussions would bring us any closer to any general solution which is simply not there. We cannot approach a goal that is not existing. And in this respect, at least my interpretation is the working group was very productive in bringing this on a consensus, and further discussions would probably divide us even more than where we are at the moment. My interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you, Europe. I tend to share your views when reading the document and listening to all the interventions. I think we have to stop here. I don't think we can keep the interpreters longer, but I will quickly consult. Okay, with the indulgence of the interpreters, we are almost finished, I have the feeling. So I hope we can have a couple of more minutes to finish, to wrap this matter up. That would be very appreciated if we could do that.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, okay, thank you very much. I see front, and then I will try to conclude.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, sir. I, too, would like to thank the co-chairs of the working group. Now, I've understood I better be brief, and that was my intention anyway. We agree with what Germany had to say, point by point. I want to say that. And I also want to recall that we have seen that there is a need to reduce mortality, that as a minimum. So we have to avoid harvesting the young eels in the wild. And that deals with ranching, because if you can't harvest them in the wild, then that would have a problem with respect to ranching. So we have to bear that need in mind.
And I will take two short interventions from WWF and IUCN. Please be short and concise if possible. So WWF, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly picking up on France's point, if we're looking at source code R and the probability of mortality in the life cycle, we should really be looking at the probability of mortality between hatching and the arrival of the juveniles in European estuaries, and that's where the mortality is likely to be highest. And therefore, at the moment, the document compares mortality of juveniles with mortality of adults, and of course it's a favourable comparison, but that doesn't really address the requirements of the definition of source code R. Thank you very much. So we would regard this as something that does have to be taken forward in further discussions.
IUCN, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is given on behalf of IUCN, Traffic, WWF and ZSL. With respect to paragraph 12 on the risks and benefits of released seized live eels, we feel that there is overlap with the issues raised in paragraphs 7D and 8D of document 42.2 relating to the release of cultured and on-grown seahorses into the wild. Indeed, this issue is relevant to other CITES listed aquatic species such as totoaba and humphead wrasse. As such, there's value in considering releases across species and developing generic guidelines to inform best practice. Release of fish is often carried out under the guise of conservation and is sometimes included as NDFs, when in fact the costs and benefits to wild populations are poorly understood. As such, one guiding point could be that any release into wild populations should be monitored to evidence any benefits and/or negative impacts. Thank you, Chair. On behalf of myself and the eels, you will be missed.
Okay, so the conclusions would be the Animals Committee agreed to request the Secretariat to invite China, Egypt, Cuba and Turkey to submit detailed information on trade in eels for consideration at the 78th meeting of the Standing Committee, and invite the Standing Committee to propose a specific draft decision directed to those parties that do not respond seeking this information. B. Note the information in paragraph 11 concerning the potential use of source code R ranching for specimens of European eel, Anguilla from aquaculture production systems. Agree to propose the draft decision in paragraph 12 to renew the unfinished task to discuss the potential risks and benefits of reintroducing seized live European eels into the wild to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, and D. Convey the contents of paragraphs 13 and 14 as amended to, to the Standing Committee for its consideration through its intersession working group on eels, noting the need for refinement. Okay. So that's, I see nodding heads from the members. So that would be the conclusion on the document on eels. So with this, do we have any housekeeping information? Secretariat? No, nothing. So with this, I think we can close to this morning's meeting. Thank you very much for your indulgence, especially the interpreters. Thank you very much. So we could finish this morning's agenda. So see you back at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.